Programming is a set of instruction delivered to a system. The instructions are in the form of statements, which are a lot like sentences in human language. Each programming language will have its own syntax, but there does tend to be quite a bit of overlap for many parts of a language amongst the various languages. What I mean by that is when you look at the actual way a program is written from language to language, you'll see that there's many similarities. For example, if you look at something like Java, you'll see it looks very similar to C++, which in turn looks very similar to Visual Basic or JavaScript. Now, when I say system, what I'm talking about is a desktop computer could be a system, or a web server that delivers information to the internet, and then on the client side, a user views that information. Or it could be a smartphone, or something even as small as a microprocessor chip inside of the operating system of something like a microwave oven. Now, there are many common programming languages that you've probably encountered as a user. Java is one that's very popular. It's used in Android phones, but as well as in a lot of embedded chips. It used to be the most common programming language because it was found in a lot of embedded programs in small microprocessors, such as what I mentioned before, the operating system of a microwave oven or something like that. Python is one that's very, very popular as well because it's so easy to use and read and very easy to learn because of those things as well. It's found in a lot of microprocessors as well. The Raspberry Pi, for example, utilizes Python. It's used for desktop apps, web applications, games, data science, AI. JavaScript is a programming language. It's not the same as Java. It's very, although the syntax does look fairly similar, but it's not the same programming language. It's generally runs in a browser. So basically the browser will interpret. And JavaScript is a great language to start with because all you need to write it is a text editor and a browser. Generally, you want to have a development environment when you're writing programming code, programming statements, as they have hints and whatnot. But with JavaScript, you can actually write it with a plain text editor that comes with your operating system, such as TextEdit on the Mac or Notepad with Microsoft operating systems. PHP is another very common programming language, and it's commonly used in web pages. There's two meanings to PHP. It's personal home pages or PHP hypertext processor. So the home pages suggest it's very commonly used for web pages, and I generally use it to interact with a database. So anytime I collect data from users, that is content that they add or if they purchase items, then I would always use PHP to communicate with a database. C++, that's a very common programming language for creating desktop applications. It tends to be, these days, it tends to be a little bit more Windows-centric as opposed to Mac and Linux. But the operating system, the Windows operating system, is written in C++, and the applications that run on Windows are very commonly written in C++ as well. HTML and CSS aren't really programming languages. I like to think of them as display languages. So they take content and then display the structure of the content. So basically what paragraph comes first in a body of a document. And that's the HTML takes care of the structure of the content, and then the CSS takes care of the appearance of the content. So content management systems are web applications, so they work with a database, and generally they're written in PHP, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. The PHP handles all of the data collection, and then the database such as MySQL will handle the actual data retention. CMSs such as WordPress, which is useful for personal blogs. So if you don't have a bunch of users who are all adding data to a web page, something like WordPress is very useful. There's a lot of plugins which allow you to extend the usability of WordPress. We have CMSs like Drupal and Joomla, which are very common for building larger applications. So if you want to create a store, for example, where you have hundreds of transactions per day, and you have a lot of customers that you're retaining the data for, you probably wouldn't want to use WordPress for something like that. Although WordPress does allow you to have a storefront. Drupal is more useful for retaining the data for all of your customers, as well as Joomla. They're very similar. Drupal tends to be a little bit more technician-centric, I guess is a good phrase. Whereas Joomla is a little bit, I guess, more user-friendly. Joomla has a lot more plugins. Last time I checked, it seemed like it was around 50 times, maybe 1,000 times more plugins. I can't remember. Drupal already has a lot of plugins. I develop applications in Drupal quite a bit. The only reason I have a preference is because it was the first CMS I started developing in. Had I had a choice, I probably would have gone with Joomla because of all of the plugins. Another CMS is Moodle, which is actually an LMS. Moodle is a CMS that has things like assignments and quizzes and stuff like that built in, and there's a grading system. You can actually add that stuff to Joomla and Drupal, but Moodle is actually, LMSs are actually built with that in mind, so those will be part of the actual application. You don't have to add them via plugins. And Moodle is a very, very common LMS. The UGOT class LMS that we're looking at right now, that we're using for these courses, is also an LMS. When developing applications for the web, you'll commonly hear the back end or the server side is where a lot of the work is done. Now we come to websites and apps, and now they are actually very similar things. A website can be thought of as a web application, and you can get a lot of functionality out of static content, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But the application is far more functional once you add a database as well. Now, an app is installed on the actual device. You only install it once, and it can be standalone or interact with data from the web. Essentially, the app removes the browser tools from the app. So it's basically the user interface that the programmer chooses. So it gives the programmer the freedom to only deliver the necessary functionality required for the app, not all of the additional functionality required in a browser. And that's a quick overview of programming. Thanks so much for watching.